Everybody, welcome. Hi, everybody, welcome. We're expecting a pretty big crowd here tonight, so we're going to wait just a couple minutes or a couple seconds until more people come in. There are a number of people in the waiting room, and they're joining the meeting now.
How'd they get the pictures of people? Was the camera on us?
Right.
Turn it off.
Come on.
I might be doing something that.
Folks, as you come into the meeting, could you please mute yourselves because we can hear you when you're speaking.
Well, if people go to
Okay. Hi, everybody. Did everybody enjoy the debate last night? Okay. All right, I think we're going to get started. Hello and welcome to the 2020 Ballot Questions Town Hall for Legislative Districts 15, 16, 17, and 39, as well as the Germantown Democratic Club. The Montgomery County Democratic Party thanks you for being here. My name is Linda Foley, and I'm the chair of the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee. Before we get our program underway, I'd like to review a few rules for this meeting. First of all, we'd like you to mute yourselves so that everyone's audio and video are off. Okay, so please turn off your video as well. We're going to do that for all the participants except the speakers. And I do suggest that you set your Zoom view, for those of you who know how to do that, for speaker's view to get the most out of this event. If your sign-on is something other than your full name, please change it to your full name by clicking the More box next to your name on the participants list and typing in your name. We will be taking questions during this session. We'll be taking them through the Zoom chat feature. Please click on the chat icon and you can enter your questions in the box at the very bottom of the panel. Make sure your questions are directed to everyone and not just to me. You may submit your questions anytime during the presentations. And please begin your question with your full name, especially if your Zoom username is something other than your full name. So one more thing, we know that while all of you are interested citizens here and that this is a very important topic, and we know you will conduct yourselves.
You've muted yourself, Linda.
Sorry about that, everybody. Okay. Please be advised that we will remove you from the call. We will remove from the call anyone acting in an uncivil manner. And so besides electing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, as well as David Trone, Jamie Raskin, and John Sarbanes, in Montgomery County, we have some other really important decisions to make as voters. Our ballots have 6 so-called ballot questions, 4 affecting our county government and 2 affecting our state laws and constitution. We also have to vote on the retention of state appellate judges. There are 3 of them. We have a wonderful lineup tonight of elected officials who are going to inform us about those questions. But before we do that, I'd like to acknowledge the leaders of the various clubs and caucuses who are here tonight. We have Gail Cheek, who is the chair of the D15 Caucus, Elliot Greenwald, who is the president of the D16 Democratic Club, and I don't know whether Ellie Shaw Belbilia is here tonight, but she is the president of the D17 Democratic Club, and Avis Driver is the the chair of the D39 Democratic Club. The Germantown Democratic Club is headed by Andrew Sondry, and Andrew is here tonight. That's one of our newest clubs, one of our newest Democratic clubs. Now for our program. We will begin tonight with Council Member Andrew Friedson, who will explain Council questions A and B. which affect the way the county can raise revenue. He will be followed by Councilmember Evan Glass, who will discuss questions C and D, which affect the composition of the county council. State Senator Nancy King and Delegate Mark Corman will then discuss question 1, a state question, which deals with the role of the state legislature in Maryland's budgeting process. They will be followed by State Senator Craig Zucker, who will talk about question 2, which would allow wagering on sporting and other events in Maryland with the monies going to education. Delegate Kathleen Dumais will explain the procedure for voting on retention of state appellate judges. And then finally, County Executive Mark Elrich will wrap up the evening with an overview of the election and the ballot questions. We will take questions and discussions after each segment using the chat feature as I explained. So now, I would like to begin by having Council Member Andrew Friedson, 1st District Council Member Andrew Friedson, begin with his explanation of questions A and B. Just so you know, the Montgomery County Democratic Party is recommending that Democrats and all voters vote yes for, or vote in favor of question A and vote against question B. So now I'll turn it over to Andrew Friedson. Andrew.
Well, thank you so much, Linda. Really appreciate all of your leadership of the party and the party's leadership on these issues. You know, we saw last night what is at stake in this election at the national level. And as you mentioned, nothing less than the Republic is on the line. But the fate of the county and the future that we decide to have is also on the ballot as well. That's really what these questions are about. And these tax policy questions are a question of whether we want to go backwards and whether we want the most regressive property tax policy that we could possibly have, similar to Proposition 13 that nearly bankrupted California's localities, and TRIM that many people have heard that Prince George's County took decades to climb out of and crawl out of, or whether we want to build a better future that allows us to invest in our infrastructure and education, all the shared priorities that we have. And it really is quite simple. Question A is the answer to our broken property tax system. It sets a consistent tax rate every year that allows us to fund schools, libraries, and parks. Your property tax rate will remain exactly the same as your property tax rate the previous year, unless 9 members of the county council vote unanimously to increase it. No need for a PhD in economic theory, no complicated formulas, no arguments over what is and what isn't included and exempted, just a very straightforward policy that everybody can understand. It's straightforward, as tax policy should be, and by keeping tax rates stable, and this is a really important point, it will, in and of itself, generate tens of millions of dollars in revenue over time without even needing to raise taxes. So this would be a significant and dramatic change. Question A would be the most progressive tax policy change we've had in property tax policy change that we've had in Montgomery County in 30 years. On the other hand, question B, which is being proposed by Robin Ficker, the latest Ficker failure. It's bad, it's broken, it's backwards, and it could bankrupt Montgomery County, and I don't say that lightly. It doubles down on our existing broken property tax policy, turning a bad system as it currently is into a potentially catastrophic one by completely eliminating any ability to override it, even in an emergency like COVID-19, and threatening our AAA bond rating and our ability to fund transportation infrastructures, school infrastructure, and all the other priorities that we have in Montgomery County. Currently, the system that we have is a confusing formula. It sets the annual property tax rate, and it starts with the amount of revenue that the county is allowed to collect, and only is able to add to it the rate of inflation, which currently is 1.27%. I mean, it's basically nothing. and it's heading towards potentially nothing, even maybe negative inflation. That's backwards. Normally you set a property tax rate, and when you grow the economy, the county captures the benefits of rising property values. When the economy is doing well, when residents and businesses are doing well, the county does well too. We don't have a system that does that. When people say we want to grow the tax base so we don't have to grow the tax rates, in Montgomery County, we don't have a system that allows you to do that. It's not good for residents, it's not good for businesses, and it's not good for Montgomery County. We can't just stop Robin Ficker and the potential fiscal catastrophe that could create by passing question B. We have a chance to fix what we all know is broken, a system that has held us back for far too long, and create a policy that is consistent with all of our interests aligning together. Economic development, our progressive priorities. When the county does well, our residents and businesses do well. And when our residents and businesses do well, our county does well. And that's how it should be, and that's how it will be if we pass A, 4A, and are against B. Question A is about changing a tax system that doesn't work, simplifying something that should not be as complicated as it is. Question B doubles down on a status quo that clearly isn't working. It makes a bad policy a potentially catastrophic one for the county and all the values that we all share. Question A is about fiscal responsibility. Question B is about fiscal insanity. Question A is a bet on Montgomery County. Question B is joining Robin Ficker to bet against Montgomery County. I hope you all will join me, join all of my colleagues on the county council, the county executive, the entire county delegation, the Montgomery County Democratic Party, the teachers, a laundry list of progressive and labor organizations and leaders, the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, and a host of business leaders and organizations, and move forward with a significant change that will benefit our county, that will benefit our residents and businesses, and will allow us to finally have a policy that is clear, it's consistent, and it reflects the values that we all share. Be happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you for that, Councilman Member Friedson. We already have a couple of questions in the chat. So we have a question from Rachel Hopp. What do PG, Anne Arundel, and others do? I assume she means with respect to this issue about raising, what do they do to raise revenue?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the system that we currently have in place is a revenue cap. Like I said, that's good for Jeopardy when you start with the answer. It's not good for tax policy. Prince George's County for many years had a system called TRIM. TRIM was a similarly detrimental policy. This one is actually even potentially more restrictive if question B passes, but it nearly destroyed Prince George's County, really hurt its ability to fund its schools. In fact, the state put in place a number of overrides over the years to allow Rashern Baker, for instance, to raise property taxes outside of that system. And finally, they were able to get through and get out of a system that had hampered the county for many years and affected its AAA bond rating, as we mentioned earlier, which made it more expensive to build schools, build rec centers, build libraries, made it nearly impossible to fund the type of school system that Prince George's County deserved. None of our regional counterparts in Virginia or in DC have anything remotely similar to this. It's a very non-traditional system. Very few jurisdictions have a system that is exclusively based on a revenue cap versus a rate-based system where you have a set rate, and if the value of the properties in Montgomery County across the board go up, then the county benefits from that additional growth. And if we have new residents and new growth, we benefit from that as well.
Okay, another question. This one from Jim Lieberman. Why will A generate new revenue if the rate does not change?
Yeah, the way the current system is set up, because inflation has been so low, and because it has such a complicated formula that doesn't really make sense, we don't benefit from new development, new construction in a way that we should. And so ultimately what ends up happening is we have new properties coming online, and we're not able to take full advantage of the additional revenue that in a normal system they would generate. It actually lowers taxes over time. So just to give you a sense, the property tax that you'll hear Mr. Ficker talk about quite a bit, the 8.7% property tax increase that happened 4 years ago, our tax rates are already lowered from when they were raised at that point, from the point at which they were raised just 4 years ago. And that's because inflation has been very low. The assessments have gone up. And because of that, the property taxes over time go down. Of course, the cost of schools don't go down. The cost of transportation infrastructure doesn't go down. The cost of providing healthcare during a global pandemic has not gone down. And so it really isn't a situation that connects things that have anything to do with one another. The county should benefit when the economy does well locally. It should have challenges when the economy does poorly locally, and we should be incentivized so everybody's boats are all rowing in the same direction. We have a system now that doesn't reflect that. If you simply keep the tax rate stable and you grow the value of properties, you grow the local economy, businesses and residents, the county would see the revenue that is generated. That's literally what it means when people say we want to grow the tax base, not the tax rates. We have a system that caps the tax base and over time effectively lowers the tax rates to the point where we can't ultimately and eventually fund the type of infrastructure to support the growth that we want, to support the priorities that we share.
And then I see one more question, and I guess this goes together. This is from Howard Schoenholtz. And he first asked, is there a plan to get this plain English explanation to all residents of the county? And he adds, I think that might be a little bit of a rhetorical question, but he adds, it's important to counteract Ficker's simplistic, you do not want to have lower property taxes, quote unquote. So
yeah, well, a couple interesting points. I will say, Mr. Ficker's tax bill, you can look it up, is actually lower than it was 4 years ago. And so when he talks about we can't afford another 8.7% tax increase, and that's all the council wants to do, that's all the county wants to do, which is what he's consistently said, his taxes are actually lower than they were 4 years ago. That's a fact. You can look it up, and so can he. This is a consistent tax rate. It's a rational tax policy. It allows us to grow our economy and fund our priorities. And I think many people resonate with the idea of having a tax policy that they can actually understand, that's consistent year over year. I mean, what we are putting in place is simple. What we have in place is really complicated. And so, I think what has resonated with most folks who I've spoken to is the point that your property tax rate will stay the same unless 9 members of the county council vote unanimously to increase it. Year over year consistency, straightforward and clear and consistent. You know exactly what you're going to get, and we get the benefit in the county from an economy that's growing so that we can support the priorities that we all have. Obviously, Mr. Ficker will try to simplify things. He's not necessarily totally focused on facts. That's not necessarily his interests. And so we do have to fight back against that. There are a number of efforts to work on this, to get the message out. There's a ballot committee, Montgomery Countyans for A and Against B, that David Blair is chairing. There's a Montgomery Neighbors Against B, specifically to fight B, that a number of progressive organizations are leading. Will Roberts and Jill Ortman-Faust are the co-chairs of that effort. There's an effort by the realtors who have engaged on this issue, GCAR, in a significant way. And there's a no on B, no on D. You'll hear from Evan Glass shortly on the C and D questions, but no on B, no on D, which is an effort that Ike Leggett, Connie Morella, David Blair, and Carmen Ortiz are involved in as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that in your mailbox very soon, from what I understand from our fearless leader, Linda Foley, is the is mail and a ballot, a sample ballot, a modified sample ballot from the County Democratic Party, which shares the yes on A, no on B, for A and against B message, along with the other questions that you're going to hear tonight.
Right, and Michael Tardif, our communications guru, has put in the chat, in addition to that, he has put in the chat a place where you can go on the web, where we have posted on the Montgomery County Democratic Party website a succinct description of the ballot questions and our position on them. And it's a very easy URL to remember. It's mcdcc.org/ballot questions. And as I said, Michael Tardif has put that in the chat, and please feel free to click on that and take a look at it. And hopefully, you know, there'll be some clear explanations there. I don't see any other questions on this particular issue. I would like to mention, since we're talking about some things that are out there, we did have a very excellent effort on the part of the Democratic Central Committee and the Democratic Party of a ballot question process where we studied the ballot questions and came up with our positions, or actually the precinct organization, our 170, 180 precinct officials attended a meeting and voted on what our position on these questions should be, following some really excellent work by a ballot questions advisory committee that was headed by Erwin Rose of our Central Committee. Erwin is on this call tonight. And also on that committee were Elliot Greenwald and Linda Burgeon, who are also on this call tonight. So those folks did a tremendous job of researching these questions, and the positions that we came to are not something that we just, you know, threw up in the air and said, oh, okay, we're just going to support this or that. We did do a lot of research on it, and we had a vote by, as I say, more than 170 grassroots activists who voted on what our position should be on all of these questions. What I would like to do now is move to, and again, let me just reiterate that from the Democratic Party's point of view, we believe that you should vote for question A and against question B. Now, having said that, let me move on to the other two county questions that are on the ballot, and those are questions C and D. We do have on the call Council Member Evan Glass, who is an at-large council member. So now I'd like to call on Evan to give an explanation of questions C and D.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Linda and Michael, tech guru extraordinaire, helping lead and facilitate all of these excellent community conversations. Really good stuff. Erwin, thank you for helping steer the Central Committee through this long process of educating everybody about all of these ballot measures. And thank you to all of you for being with us on a Wednesday evening to talk about local government, because as we saw last night, I think we are all really proud to be in a forum like we are right now, where we are engaging in a respectful and civil way, and we are talking about facts, right? And so with that, let me dive into questions C and D, which are about the makeup of the Montgomery County Council and the best way for the county's legislative branch to meet the needs of our growing and diverse community. But you know, before I talk about what the impacts of questions C and D might be, let's start with a little history lesson. You know, the first Montgomery County Council was seated in 1970. And at that time, all 7 members were elected at large. And in that arrangement, 5 of those members were required to live in specific geographic regions, but everybody was elected by the entire Montgomery County. And that is the same way, some of you might know, that we elect the school board members, where everybody in Montgomery County votes for every school board member, but there are geographic residency requirements for some of them. But then in November of 1986, the voters chose to increase the number of council seats from 7 to 9. And that ballot initiative passed. And that is the same makeup that we have today. And it went into effect in 1990. And in that makeup, we have 9 members of the county council, 5 who live in councilmatic districts elected solely by those residents in those districts, and then 4 who are at large, elected by every single person in the county. And there's really one important element of this arrangement, and it's that residents get to vote for 5 council members, 4 who are at large and 1 who is in the district where they live. So now let's fast forward to today. And we know that residents have successfully submitted a petition to change the system and would eliminate the at-large positions and create 9 new positions. And that is question D. And on its face, it might seem like it's sensible, but I actually think that such a proposal would be a step backwards. First, it would create a parochial system where you just have district members looking out for their district. And then secondly, it would disenfranchise everyone in Montgomery County, reducing the number of people you get to vote for from 5 council members to just 1. And so here we are, 30 years since the last reforms were made and situated in 1990, and we are on the precipice of change. And so I proposed question C, which is on the ballot. And question C would increase the size of the council by adding 2 districts. So why would I introduce such a proposal? Well, since the council was last restructured in 1990, remember the referendum was in 1986 and it took effect in 1990. The residential population of Montgomery County has increased by nearly 50%. 50%, 50. And that shift has resulted in us having the largest populated districts in the entire DC region, with more than 210,000 people per district. And so I think that adding 2 districts would put us more in line with comparable jurisdictions. It would increase the diversity of the council, and importantly, it would allow every resident to maintain a central component of our current system, which is voting for more than 1 member of the council. And the question was asked to Councilmember Friedson about how other jurisdictions assess their property taxes. Well, I'll share with you how other jurisdictions populate their county council. The District of Columbia has 8 districts and 5 at-large members. And in Prince George's County, they had 9 districts for decades. And that is exactly what question D proposes to do. So Prince George's had question D in effect for decades, and they realized it wasn't working out very well. And so in 2018, they expanded their council by adding 2 at-large members. So now they're at 11 members. And closer to home, where I know some of you live, the 2 largest jurisdictions, the 2 largest municipalities in Montgomery County, the cities of Gaithersburg and Rockville, their city councils are elected entirely at large. And so I think adding 2 districts is a step towards electoral progress because it would enhance the responsiveness to a rapidly growing constituency while also maintaining a key element of our current system, which is allowing every one of you and your neighbors to vote for 5 members of the council. And so question C is supported by the Democratic Party. Thank you to all of you and the precinct leaders. It's supported by our Montgomery County teachers, MCEA. It's supported by SEIU and many other groups. And question D is opposed by all of those same groups, in addition to former County Executive Ike Leggett and former Republican Congresswoman Connie Morella. because they think it would be parochial. And so in summary, I think adding 2 districts is the better alternative for the voters of Montgomery County and our democratic process. And so Linda, I turn it back to you for some good questions, I presume.
Okay, so I'm trying to keep up with this a little bit because the questions are coming in here. Okay, so the first question, I believe, I'm trying to find it here. Give me a break in the chat. Okay, Christine Hager says, well, she asks initially to please clarify that if the votes are the same for A and B or C and D, that they nullify each other. And Erwin Rose from the Ballot Question Advisory Committee did, in fact, answer that and say, yes, that appears to be the case, although there could be some litigation over it. But based on what's happened in the past, yeah. So, and then Christine asks, how much does each additional council member with staff cost?
So that question is about the investment that would have to be made. And here in Montgomery County, we invest in early voting. That's underway right now. We're investing in mail-in drop boxes to make sure that every one of our votes is properly counted and safely secure until it is counted. And here in Montgomery County, we also are at the forefront of having public campaign financing, where we don't want candidates to be beholden to any special interests. And I think that after 30 years of not investing in our Montgomery County Council, because the population has increased by 50%, now is the time to make that investment.
Okay. Kelly Alvarez asks, do any of the current at-large members live in the Up County? And how many at-large members have come from the Up County in the last 10 years?
So that's a great question. Former County Executive Ike Leggett, when he was talking about this, he said that in the last number of years, there has been some disproportionate representation in regards to where certain people might live. But he says that corrects itself because it has corrected itself in the past. And so these things come in waves. But I needn't need to remind you that of the 33 Democrats who ran for the 4 at-large spots in 2018, the person who came in 5th place and lost by just a few thousand votes is a dear friend of mine, Marilyn Balcom. And I think I saw her picture. She's
yeah, she's on this call. Yeah, she's on this call.
And Marilyn, came in 5th place, and she lives in Germantown. And Marilyn is actually co-chairing the committee, which is Residents for More Representation, which is expressing support for question C and opposition to question D, because I, and so many others believe that people will lose representation if we go to 9 districts. And better to increase the size of the council to reflect the growth and diversity that we have here in Montgomery County than to disenfranchise people. So in coming years, there will be ample opportunities for people to run for office. There is one at-large member who is term limited out. There is the District 2 council member who is term limited out. And then if question C passes, there will be 2 more districts created.
Okay, and then Debbie Jacobs asks, why would it, I assume she means question C, why would it increase diversity of the council? Maybe, maybe not. She asked that question. So maybe you want to explain how that
Yeah,
works.
so here in Montgomery County, we are fortunate to have 4 of the 10 most diverse communities in the entire country. And that is an honor that we have here in Montgomery County, because we know that diversity matters, and our diversity is our strength. And those 4 localities are Germantown, Rockville, Gaithersburg, and Silver Spring. So 4 of the 10 most diverse communities here in Montgomery County. And this current council already is the most socially diverse council that has ever been elected. Of the 9 members, we have 2 Black members, 2 Latino, and the first LGBTQ member of the council that's currently seated. So if we expand the council and add 2 more districts, the wealth of diversity that already exists I expect will be represented on the council because voters will select them.
And we have a question from Shizi, and please excuse me, sir, if I mispronounce your name, but I think I said it right, Shizi. And he's asking, how would it work to expand to 11 rather than 9 council members? It sounds to me like he's asking, how would you determine what those districts are because you're adding?
Great question. So, there's been a lot of questions about whether or not we should have this conversation now, whether we should expand the council or restructure the council at this time. There's a confluence of crises that are going on, economic and health. But the reality is we are completing the census. And the census is due next week. Hopefully all of you have completed your census. Please encourage other people to do so as well. And when that census concludes, every legislative body across the country is going to start a redistricting process, from the US Congress to the Maryland General Assembly to the Montgomery County Council. So we will form a redistricting committee, and feel free to contact me if you're interested in learning more about how to apply to be on that redistricting committee. I'm happy to share that information with you. But the redistricting committee will be tasked with redrawing the districts. And they have 3 options that the voters will dictate to them. First option is drawing 5 districts, which is the status quo. The second option is drawing 7 new districts if question C prevails. And the third option is drawing 9 new districts if question D prevails. Now, where are those districts going to be? We don't know. And anyone who professes to know is not basing that statement on data, and that data is the census. And while it is absolutely true that Clarksburg and Germantown have experienced incredible growth over the last decade, it is also true that Rockville and Bethesda and Wheaton and Silver Spring have seen tremendous growth over the last decade. So we don't know where these districts are going to be. And anyone who promises them in certain areas, particularly up county, I think it's a false hope. And so I'll leave it at that. But if you are interested in serving on the redistricting commission, please do reach out to me. I'll put my contact information in the chat box.
Thank you. Kelly Alvarez is coming back at you and saying that she doesn't think that you answered the question about the cost of adding 2 council members. So do you want to maybe go over that again?
Sure. So I apologize, Kelly, for leaving out that detail. So it is all public record that every council member receives a salary of approximately $138,000 and has staff that are about $400,000 to $500,000. And so in our budget of $5.8 billion and a legislative branch that has not, I think, received the care that it should over 30 years and a 50% population growth, I think those investments in our legislative branch are worth democracy and representation.
Okay. And Julie Beth Green says, it may be that functionally there isn't the same degree of racial bloc voting as in other areas. I'd like to know what analysis has been done on the racial equity issue. I don't know whether you can, I mean, that's a pretty big question, but.
So it is a big question, and what I will relay are concerns that I have heard from communities of color, where in other jurisdictions, when there are all districts, those districts can tend to be packed, and they tend to be not ethnically diverse. And there is real concern, given the diversity that we have here in Montgomery County, the social diversity of notably the at-large members, because again, of the 2 Black, the 2 Latino, and the 1 LGBTQ, of those 5, 3 are at large. And so there is concern among communities of color that going into an all-district system would have an adverse effect on their representation. Okay,
thank you. All right, I don't see, there are a lot of comments in the chat about who runs for county council seats. And Marilyn Balcom, whom you mentioned, Councilmember Glass, makes the point that we all currently have 5 votes for council, and the 9 district proposal, that is question D, eliminates 4 of those votes. Go ahead.
And so that is a real concern. And so let's just suss this out a little bit, that if there were to be 9 districts, Germantown is the center of District 2. It is the center of District 2. And so if there were another district in Up County, then there might be 2 districts in Up County. And having 2 independent individual council members versus 9, some people think is not as good as having 5 of 9, which is what the status quo is.
All right. So I don't see oh, there is a question again from Judy Beth Green. She wants to know, does the county NAACP support the at-large system?
I don't know about the NAACP, but I know the Black Democrats of Montgomery County do, the Latino Democrats of Montgomery County do, the LGBTQ Democrats of Montgomery County do, CASA supports question C. All those organizations, all of diversity that we love and welcome here in Montgomery County, are all supporting question C and are all opposing question D.
And let me just add again that the Montgomery County Democratic Party is in the same place as those diversity groups. We are recommending that voters vote for question C and against question D. And that's our recommendation as a party.
Yeah, and Linda, I'm just looking at the comments real quick, and I'll make one short point before we turn it over to our state delegates. There are people who are commenting and have over the last number of weeks and months about at-large systems, calling them unfair and unrepresentative. Here in Montgomery County, we do not have a full at-large system. We have a hybrid system, and the hybrid systems tend to work. And if we expand the hybrid system to include even more districts, I think that benefits everybody. So those who are expressing concern legally or otherwise about at-large systems, we do not have a fully at-large system. Our system has currently 5 districts and 4 at-large members.
Right. Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Michael Tardif, our communications team chair, to please put up again in the chat the link to the ballot questions description and our recommendations. I think you'll find those descriptions to be very succinct and clear about what all these proposals do. So if you could put that link back up there in the chat, Michael, that would be great. So now, as Councilmember Glass said, we're going to move on to the state ballot questions. So actually, if for those of you who have received your ballot, and some of you may have already voted, yay. For those of you who have received your ballot and looked at it, you will see that the state questions actually come first in the scheme of things. So we took the county council questions first in this case, but they are actually the last items on your ballot that you will be voting for or against. So let me just review really quickly in terms of the Montgomery County Democratic Party. We are recommending that you vote for A, that you vote against B, that you vote for C, and that you vote against D. That's the recommendation of the Montgomery County Democratic Party. All right. So now I think we will move on to the state ballot questions. There are 2 of those, and I'm going to call on State Senator Nancy King to begin, and she's going to talk about question 1, and then she's going to be followed by State Delegate Mark Corman, who will also talk about question 1. So Senator King.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Happy to be here with you tonight. We've done a lot of discussing about these state ballot issues also. And I think that this one is a real help, I think, for the delegation to Annapolis. As many of you know, Maryland is the only state in the country where the governor sets the budget, but we can't add to it. The only thing we can do, we can take away from it, but we have very little flexibility with it. This ballot issue number 1 would just give us the flexibility to move things around. It doesn't let us add to the budget, but it lets us move different accounts around so that we can get some of our priorities funded where we haven't been able to do that in the past. So we ask for your support for ballot issue number 1.
And Delegate Corbin?
We had as Democrats, if you look at the last 20 years, in 10 of those years, we've had Republican governors, but that entire time we've had supermajorities in the legislature. No chamber in the legislature has been Republican, I think, since the 1920s. So as Democrats, giving the legislature this power is really important, but Nancy gave you the top line. So thanks for your support. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. Does anybody have any questions about question 1? I should mention that, and I forgot to when I introduced this, that the Montgomery County Democratic Party and actually the Maryland Democratic Party is recommending that you vote for question 1. That also is included on our website, mcdcc.org/ballot questions, as well as that recommendation. So we are recommending that you vote for question 1. Does anybody have any questions or concerns or anything to add about question 1? My experience has been that this one is not very controversial and is pretty easy to understand. Oh, okay. So Howard Schoenholtz asks, will question 1, if enacted, slow down the state budget process? Good question.
Not at all. We have 90 days every year to come up with a balanced budget. And as far back as I can remember, we have had a balanced budget. So Maryland, if you compare us to other states, there are a lot of states that have to stay in their capital longer to come up with a balanced budget. And we, for as long as I've been around, we have been able to easily come to a balanced budget.
I'm looking, I don't see any other questions or comments about question 1. Oh, from Linda Burgeon from our Ballot Questions Advisory Committee. She says, can you speak to how restrictive the Maryland rules are compared to other states? And I think what she means is the role of the legislature, probably, right? Go ahead.
Well, as I said before, talking about the budget, with the governor being the only governor in the country that gets to set the budget, I think it really puts us at a real handicap compared to other states.
And we see that play out sometimes, right? When we want things, when the delegation wants things funded, and you know, they don't have the ability to really manipulate that budget very much to do that.
Right. Well, and we have had many times that we have put things in the budget. We have passed legislation for the governor to fund it, and he just chooses not to and doesn't fund it. So this would help, I think.
All right, I don't see anything else on question 1. So now we're going to move to question 2. Question 2 is the Montgomery County Democratic Party is recommending voting for question 2. I'm going to ask State Senator Craig Zucker to talk about question 2. Before I do that, though, I neglected to mention that Senator King is are you the Senate Majority Leader? Is that right? Yes. So Senator King is the Senate Majority Leader. And so both of these questions had broad support. Almost, in the case of both of them, one of them had unanimous support. The other had like near unanimous support. I think there was maybe one person that voted against it from the entire Democratic delegation of the state. So not only the Montgomery County delegation, but the entire state delegation. So now I'm going to move to question 2, and I'm going to ask Senator Craig Zucker, State Senator Craig Zucker, to speak to question 2.
Well, thank you very much, Linda. Appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak tonight on question 2. You obviously heard from the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Nancy King. Also wanted to bring greetings from Senator Brian Feldman. He's teaching a course right now dealing with the Affordable Care Act. Senator Susan Lee brings greetings, and Senator Cheryl Kagan is leading a Biden for President phone bank. So she's out there busy working, and I wanted to make sure that I was here tonight to talk about not only the importance of question 1, which you heard about, but also question ballot 2, which is sports betting. One of the roles that I serve in Annapolis is chair of the Democratic Caucus, and as the majority leader will tell you, we were looking for ways that we can fund the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which is the Kerwin Commission recommendations to expand pre-K, pre-kindergarten, career readiness, and really make sure that we give our education system a booster shot. We needed to take a wholesome approach to do this, and sports betting was one of the ways that we thought this was possible. Every state around us is currently implemented sports betting. Right now, about half the country has it. To put it in perspective, basically what you're doing is you're betting on your favorite team or the team you dislike most. And right now what happens is you're in Silver Spring, you walk down 16th Street, you cross that DC line, you could take out your cell phone, bet in DC, and then walk back home. So that $20 to $40 million worth of revenue that would be going entirely to education, the Education Trust Fund that helps fund the K through 12 operating budget for education. That is locked in based on what we all did at the ballot box a couple of years ago, making sure that any casino gaming revenue goes to the Education Trust Fund. So there is that lockbox. It's the General Assembly lockbox, making sure that the money that we promised for education goes there. The COVID has really devastated the country, and especially the state of Maryland. The money that we were seeing from casinos dropped about $150 million. So that's $150 million less that we were seeing fund education this year. And that's why initiatives and revenues that we can get from sports betting is so vital. That's why everyone, actually every senator in the General Assembly voted for sports betting. And every member of the House of Delegates, every member except 3 Republicans voted for it. It's a major priority for every Democrat in the state. As Linda said, the Maryland Democratic Party, this is a top priority for them. This is something the Senate Majority Leader and Senate President and Speaker of the House have been talking about everywhere they go as well. And I think you may have seen the Washington Post endorsement, but really this is about the voters having a say. We had a comprehensive bill coming out of Annapolis last year, came out of the Senate, and we got cut short by something called the global pandemic of COVID. So we had a comprehensive bill, but we ran out of time. We had 5 seconds left on the shot clock, so we had to leave early. And that's why we just decided to put it on the ballot, give people a chance to vote on it, and then when we come back into session, we'll be able to continue working out the details, which I think is pretty close to being finalized. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know that Linda, I know that there's questions in chat right now. My son has the better computer. I have I can't really follow the chat.
I'll read them. No worries. Okay, so CM James III asks, on question 2, was the initial authorization for gaming proceeds limited to education? Has that limit been complied with? Has the income had a beneficial effect on education? And to what other purpose could the sports and events gaming proceeds possibly be applied?
So right now, based on what we did in the Constitution, all the proceeds are going to education. And what it did was we were able to fund the first 3 years of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, the most expansive and comprehensive and most important education policy. And I know that the majority leaders worked on this extensively. I would say Senate Majority Leader in the country when it comes to comprehensive education policy. So without what we've received in the Education Trust Fund from casino revenue, that probably wouldn't have been a possibility. We've taken steps to make sure that all the revenue does go to the Education Trust Fund, and that's a commitment we stand by.
Can I add something on here?
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
I'm looking at some of the questions here about gaming and is it a good idea? And what we have found in the research that we've done with the sports betting so far, it's already really being done, but we have people going across the state line to do it, going to West Virginia or going into DC or Pennsylvania, and we lose out on the revenue from it. I don't think we're pushing anybody to take up sports gaming, but if they're going to do it, then we might as well get the revenues for it. And we've also found that even though we have quite a bit of money in the budget every year for people who are problem gamblers, we don't come close to using all that money. We use some, but nothing like we were expecting that we would have to use. So I ask for you to support that initiative.
And just to wrap up what Leader King said is, without question one, right now we can't add anything to the budget. So the sports betting revenue is vital in order to fund education, especially given the governor's veto of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. And if we're going to prove that we can pay for it, the sports betting revenue is a key component of that. So we need the revenue in order to pay for our democratic priorities.
Fran Rothstein asks, is gambling really the best way to fund education? And how can we be sure the money raised would even go to education ultimately? And should the state be expanding something that can be addictive and that disproportionately negatively affects low-income people?
So that's a great question. One is sports betting isn't an end-all be-all. This is part of a comprehensive approach to raise revenue. So sports betting will be is part of the greater package of digital downloads and other revenue sources. But we have to get to that whole pie. So without these chunks of money, we won't be able to get there. We are guaranteed that the money that we get from the additional revenue of sports betting will go to the Education Trust Fund. And when you talk about regressive, this is empirical data says that this is not like table games or sports betting. It is not is not as regressive as table games or video lottery terminal, which is slots. This is basically people betting on their favorite team or against the team they hate most. But this is not your type of regressive gaming that that you may have seen in the past. That's why for the house, it's not as profitable as your slots or your table games, because it really is people betting on what their heart says or what they think their gut says in terms of where the lines will be on it.
Karen Metkis, I hope I pronounced that right, Metkis or Metchis, is asking, on question 2, in previous attempts at this, the proceeds were in lieu of state funding. What guarantee is there that this would be a supplement to state funding?
So the overall education budget is $7 billion. The money that we get every year, the Education Trust Fund gets about $550 million that helps to go toward education funding. The reason why sports betting is important is this past year we saw out of the $550 million, $150 million less. And what does that mean? That means that there's less money to help bridge the digital divide, especially in the age of COVID, where people need more technology. This will help to bridge that divide. And in terms of in terms of any concern of the revenue that's and the proceeds that are made from sports betting, it is guaranteed based on what the Constitution says that it'll go to the Education Trust Fund, which will help make these priorities reality.
Okay. And Karen had a follow-up question. She said, what portion of proceeds will go to the corporate gambling operations versus what goes to the state?
So we're going to work that out when we get back to Annapolis. We were cut short. The way that the Senate bill, was left was it would be the same. It would be the same distribution as what we have for table games. That would be the same tax rate, but we're still working out the details. For us, it's getting money from the licenses, tens of millions of dollars for license fees if they want to do sports betting, and then collecting any additional revenue we can to help with the Education Trust Fund. But we're expecting just in revenue, in terms of additional revenue after the books are paid, anywhere between $20 to $40 million for the state of Maryland that would go into the Education Trust Fund that would help provide the operating money for K through 12 education.
So kind of on the heels of that, in hot pursuit, Bruce Cooper asks, how much of the generated revenue via gaming has been channeled or were channeled into education in Maryland? In other words, you understand the gambling that we already have. How much of the money is channeled to education here in Maryland?
Sure, billions of dollars. Every year we have anywhere between $550 to $600 million a year that's generated just from gaming revenue into the Education Trust Fund. And that will be expanded if voters approve sports betting. And look, I mean, the majority leader's here, Delegate Corman is here. I'm here asking you to help us to make sure we can fund our priorities. I mean, if we want the blueprint for Maryland's future, then one of the most comprehensive, important education policies that has ever been put forth in the state of Maryland, if we want that to become reality, we need revenue sources, and sports betting is one of them. And it's just part of it is part of the overall pie that we're trying to fill, and we'll make sure that it all goes to education.
And she asked the same question, asked the question you just answered, as well as asking, how will it work with sports and event gambling at certain licensed facilities? So I guess that means, like, will there be sports betting, sports wagering at casinos and racetracks and other venues?
So that's a great question. We're still working out. So I guess I can just tell you what we did, and then, so I can tell you what the Senate did, and then I'll tell you what the Senate did, and then I can tell you where I think things are going to go in the future. So what the Senate did was we included the ability for sports betting to take place at casinos. So the 6 casinos, the racetracks, and off-track betting. When the global pandemic hit and we had to cut session short by about a month, as Delegate Corman knows, and the majority leader and others, we always have to bat 1,000, so we always have to work it out with the other chamber, and we ran out of time. So instead of totally not having sports betting on the ballot, we put it on the ballot to work out the details later. But the Senate version had it at the casinos, it had it at the racetracks, and it had it at the few off-track betting facilities.
Okay, and so I think this question has already been answered, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So Kathy Milani writes, and I'll just quote what she put in the chat: will horse racing be included since there is so much controversy about the ethics and treatment/death of so many horses?
Yeah, so we've had, in the budget committee, we've now the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee reviews horse racing, and we are very concerned and monitoring what's happening with horses. We believe that, when we were going to have it at the racetracks, it was more of an opportunity for people to visit the racetracks, but we're not sure how many other people will be betting on. You could already bet on horses. So this would be an opportunity if you're going to a racetrack to bet in support of the Orioles. Hopefully you're not against the Orioles or the Nats, but it would give you an opportunity to do that. But there's already sports betting at the racetracks. There was also a question, Linda, that talked about why was there $150 million less?
Yes.
And that's because of COVID. What happened was the governor shut down the casinos. And when you shut down the casinos, there was no betting. And as a result of no betting, there was no money for the education trust fund. So as a direct result of COVID and the casinos shutting down, the education trust fund suffered a $150 million loss. And as you know, the casinos still aren't at capacity, so we're continuing to lose money. So it could be another 150 to 200 million that we could possibly lose, depending on what happens with the pandemic.
Okay, so Howard Schoenholtz has another question.
Sure.
He says you mentioned potential revenue from digital download. Would you please explain that?
Sure. I mean, so we're looking at a host of things, and one of them is, and I think we passed some version of digital, but we have a comprehensive plan to get more revenue from digital downloads of online streaming that can go to the Maryland coffers. Delegate Corman,
I was lucky enough to pass the bill that would potentially raise fuels taxes. Just so everyone knows, just for context. Look, if you want to do things like the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, it's a significant investment, and that's on top of the $7.5 billion in your money that already goes from the state coffers to K through 12 education. So two of the things that we worked on this year were on sort of the digital side. One is this digital advertising tax, first in the nation, that the Senate president put in. That one's likely to go into litigation. The other one, which I was the sponsor of, which 30 other states already do, is what's called a digital downloads tax. So the easiest way to think about it is if you go to the Barnes & Noble and buy Joe Biden's last memoir, Promise Me Dad, great book, I highly recommend it, you pay the sales tax on that. If you download the ebook to your Kindle or the audiobook to your iPhone, currently you don't pay the sales tax on that. If you lived in 30 other states, you would. And so this just makes those two things equal. If you buy the physical good or the digital good, that sales tax revenue goes into the education trust fund coffers. So not on the ballot, but just to provide the context for Senator Zucker's comment.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Okay, so Bob Bajaski says, has the money derived from gambling had an impact on the amount of funds appropriated from the general funds?
Yeah, I mean, it's helped to offset general fund contributions. I mean, we're still putting in over $7 billion for the operating money from K through 12, but that gaming revenue has added an extra 550 million plus to our education spending opportunities. So we've been able to increase our education spending based on what we're getting additional from gaming revenue. And with sports betting, that'll just increase. Well, it depends on what happens with COVID, but that'll certainly help to offset some of the loss. And then I think, Linda, I saw another question. I don't know if you want me to just jump to it, or if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. If you see it, go ahead.
Okay. So I think just for everyone's, I'll just read it. So it says, Gabrielle asked, please provide the economic demographic for people who participate in sports betting. Right now, the demographic is 0 because it's illegal in Maryland. So if anybody's doing it, what we have seen is we've seen a lot of people who are doing it illegally, and that's another people are in Maryland are already doing it. And my understanding is we're losing millions. I think the Washington Post told me that they think we lost $1 billion, and I told them I haven't seen that data, but I know that we're losing millions on it. And but demographically, I think what I've heard is that this is typically more of your middle to upper income people that are doing sports betting in other states. But in Maryland, we don't have any data of people that are doing sports betting because it's not legal yet in Maryland.
Okay, I don't think I see any other questions in the chat. I'm just going to reiterate again that the Maryland Democratic Party and the Montgomery County Democratic Party both are urging voters to vote for question 1 and for question 2 under the state questions. And again, to be clear, those come before the county council ballot questions that we discussed earlier. So I think we can move on from that. So now we're going to move to the recommendations on the state appellate court judges. And before I do that, I want to clarify. I want to clarify something about this particular question. So, Delegate Kathleen Dumais is going to explain this. But there are actually 2 sets of judges' questions on the ballot. One is this one that we're going to discuss now. The other is an election, an actual election for a circuit court judge. Those are judges in Montgomery County, in the Montgomery County Circuit Court. There are 5 people running for 4 slots there. I want to be clear that the Montgomery County Democratic Party is not making a recommendation or an endorsement in the race for circuit court judges. Okay, the Montgomery County Democratic Party is not making a recommendation in that race, nor are we making a recommendation for school board. That's because both of those contests are nonpartisan elections. People are not selected on, people do not identify their party affiliation. So those are nonpartisan elections, and we are not making recommendations for those particular elections. So with that said, I'd like to call on Delegate Kathleen Dumais to talk about the other set of judges, which is voting on retention for the state appellate court judges. Delegate Dumais.
Thank you very much. So at the appellate level, we have 2 appellate courts. One is what we call the Court of Appeals, which is technically our Supreme Court. We also have what's called the Court of Special Appeals. What you'll find on your Montgomery County ballot is that there are 3 appellate judges that are running for what's called a retention election. Retention election means that if they get at least 50% of the total vote, that then they retain their seats. The process for selecting an appellate court judge is that there is what's called an appellate court nominating commission. The commission is appointed by the governor. This nominating commission vets all of the candidates and sends a list to the governor for the governor to then make appointments to the appellate courts. And the first election after they've been appointed, they need to run in a retention election. If they are successful, they serve for a 10-year term. The end of their 10-year term, they can be reappointed and then run again for another 10-year term. On your ballot this year, and the Central Committee, Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee, is endorsing the 3 appellate judges that are on your ballot. The first is at the Court of Appeals. We are very fortunate to have Chief Judge Mary Ellen Barbera, and the Chief Judge is appointed specially by the governor, and so she is on the ballot, and I personally, as well as support what the MCDCC has said, that we support Chief Judge Barbera. There are then 2 judges on the Court of Special Appeals. The difference between the 2 is the Court of Special Appeals, every appeal that is made can go to the Court of Special Appeals. The Court of Appeals, our Supreme Court, similar to the US Supreme Court, doesn't automatically hear every appeal. They get to decide which appeals to hear, and they tend to be more on constitutional issues. We have 2 judges. There's a Judge Stephen Gould, who is from the Montgomery County Circuit, and Judge Gregory Wells, who is an at-large judge on the Court of Special Appeals. Both of them are very qualified jurists and certainly deserve to be reelected at this particular time. So again, as Linda indicated, the Central Committee supports these 2 statewide judges. And again, that I've explained the process. And as Linda said, there is not an endorsement by the party regarding the circuit court judges, which is an entirely different process and a different form of election. And obviously, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. I feel strongly about the circuit court elections, but again, we are talking about what the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee has decided, and I'm simply indicating that I hope you'll vote for the 3 appellate judges that are on the ballot.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Delegate Dumais. That was a great explanation. I hadn't heard before what the difference between those judges were. So that was really good. And let me just say again, for the folks who are on this call, so just to for your, so that it's confusing enough as it is, right? So so you're going to see, you know, on your ballot, you're going to see the candidates pretty much first, right? And then, I mean, for president and Congress, and then you're going to see, then I believe the state judges appear, the judges that Kathleen was just referencing.
Actually, the circuit court judges appear.
Oh, the circuit court, okay. Circuit court, and then the
I
state.
don't know why, but
Thank
that's the way it is.
Okay, so the circuit court judges appear first, and that's the race in which we're not making an endorsement. But then it goes to the, then you'll see the appellate court judges that Delegate Dumais described, and you will just get to vote yes or no. Yes to retain the judge,
Correct.
or no, not to retain the judge. And of course, we're recommending that we retain all 3 of those, circuit, or all 3 of those appellate court judges. We're recommending that they be retained. And that's our position. And again, that's outlined on our website and on the sample ballot mailing that we sent out. And then after that will be the state questions. Question 1 about the budget, question 2 about the sports and event wagering, and then question A about the county council budget, question B, the Robin Ficker county council proposal for budgeting, question C about the county council, restructuring the county council and adding the 2 that council member Glass described, and then question D, which is the 9-district proposal. So that's the order that they go in on the ballot. And I'm just going to, there is a question here. This is a good question for Delegate Dumais. Question about circuit court process. I thought we had a primary and selected 4 candidates. Why are there 5 on the ballot?
Sure. So I have to admit the way circuit court judges are elected is an anomaly in the state of Maryland. And the way that works is the judges that are running, there are 4 that are currently sitting judges that were appointed by the governor. In the primary, there were 2 individuals in both primaries, the Republican and the Democratic, that ran. So we had a choice of 6 people in the primary, in the Democratic primary and the Republican primary. Who gets on the ballot in the general election, keeping in mind that I realized there was a, quote, Democratic primary, the judicial elections are nonpartisan. What happens is that in the Democratic primary, 3 of the sitting judges and 1 of the challengers received the most votes. In the Republican primary, the 4 sitting judges received the most votes. When that happens, where the 2 primaries are not identical, then the 4 winners from the Democratic primary and the 4 winners from the Republican primary appear on the ballot, the general ballot for everybody. So that's why there's 5, because there were 4, the 3 sitting judges and a challenger that were successful in the Democratic primary. The 4 sitting judges were successful in the Republican primary. So then they have to go to the general. Just so that you know, if for some reason all 4 sitting judges had been successful in the Democrat and the Republican primary, they wouldn't even appear in the general election. Again, this is a very odd way to do this. And I actually was talking to Delegate Lily Chi today, and she's trying to find a way to make it so that typical or more similar to the Board of Election or Board of Education. If it's a nonpartisan election, it should be a nonpartisan election. So It's an anomaly. It's strange. There are 5 people running on the ballot. 4 are current sitting judges. 1 is a challenger. And I think that there's probably lots of information out there regarding all of the qualifications of all 5. And like I said, I feel strongly about the sitting judges as a practicing attorney, but this is my opinion only. And it is not necessarily, it's not the party position. So I'm trying to be very diplomatic and not necessarily come across too strong one way or the other, but it's a very odd way to elect judges, but that's what we've got. And so there are 5 people on the ballot. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah. And I think people are very confused by it. I mean, you know, it's very confusing and very, it seems very weird, right? Not the way we're used to doing things.
Correct.
Okay, are there any other questions for Delegate Dumais? Again, thank you for that great explanation. Okay, so I think what I'd like to do now is I'm just going to reiterate again and go down the ballot on the ballot questions so that we're all clear. And it is, so we are recommending, in order that they appear on the ballot for the ballot questions, we are recommending that we vote yes for all of the appellate court judges that are on the ballot. That's what the Democratic Party is recommending, that we vote yes for all of those. We're recommending that you vote in favor of question 1, which is the budget question, the state budget question. We're recommending that you vote in favor of question 2, which is the sports and event wagering question. We're recommending that you vote in favor of question A, which is the county council ballot question, or budgeting question, excuse me. And that you vote against question B, which is the another question relating to county revenues that was proposed by Robin Ficker. And we are recommending that you vote in favor of question C, which is a question that Councilmember Glass talked about, that expands the council by 2 seats. We're recommending that you vote against question D, which would eliminate the at-large positions on the county council and take the votes from 5. Take the votes that every voter gets to cast from 5 to 1 for members of the county council. So that is the Democratic Party position on those questions. And again, Michael has put in the chat numerous times, mcdcc.org/ballot questions, lots of information there. And as many folks mentioned, there's also a lot of other information out there by various different groups. I think what I'd like to do right now is open the floor to see if voters have any questions about voting. I know that many of you have already received your ballots. Some of you have not. I know that we're getting a lot of questions at the Democratic Party about voting. And I'm going to ask Michael Tardif, who's our communications chair, to also jump in. And so does anybody have any questions about voting, ballots, mail-in ballots, any of the rules with respect to voting, any concerns given what the President of the United States has been saying about voting? Now's your chance, rather than get put on hold on the phone. Okay. So Michael, did you want to, maybe you could just go over a little bit what we have available on our website as a resource for people who need information about where to cast their ballots and so forth.
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. I'm gonna share my screen, and I hope everyone can see that. This is our Vote 2020 election page. So if you go to mcdcc.org, Vote 2020, and it's a complete resource guide for the election. There are many organizations that provide voter information, and I will say that there are probably many who do it as well. There are none who do it better. We've got just about every possible question answered here. And this particular page is really an index that gets you to all of our other pages that have detailed information about different issues. So we have a complete page on the ballot questions. We have a page with complete voter registration information. Another page with detailed information about vote by mail, as well as direct links to the vote by mail ballot application, either the PDF form that you complete and mail or the online application. We also have links to the complete list of ballot drop box locations. There are 21 available in Montgomery County starting September 28th through 30th, and they're expanding to 45 locations by October 24. That may be a little bit confusing, but the Board of Elections has done a great job of presenting that information on their website, and we provide the direct link here to the Board of Elections website with the complete list of ballot drop box locations. And District 14 delegation, I believe, put together a Google map with the ballot drop box locations. So if you want to look them up on a map, you can click here. We provide a direct link to that map. And then finally, at the bottom of this page, we have the complete list of Montgomery County early voting locations. If you choose to vote in person, early voting will be open Monday, October 26th to Monday, November 2, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we have the complete list of locations here. And I also want to note that the early voting locations will also be open on Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd. So effectively, those voting locations are available October 26th through Election Day on November 3rd. And we note here, and this is important, we've received this question quite a bit, Montgomery County voters may vote at any early voting site or any Election Day vote center. You do not have to go to the location that's closest to your home. So if there's another location that is more convenient to you, either because of parking, accessibility, it's on your way home from work, you can go to that location. You can choose a location that's most convenient to you. You don't have to go to the one closest to your home. And we note that here. And the other thing I'd like to note at the very top, we do have the official Democratic sample ballots available online. And if you click on this link, you can download the Democratic sample ballot for your congressional district. And I just want to note that voters are permitted to carry the sample ballot into the voting booth. So if you are voting in person and you want to have those recommendations in your hand, you are permitted to print that document and carry it with you into the polls. I think that's all I have, Linda, unless there are any questions.
Well, there are a couple questions here. So Marilyn Balcom wants to confirm that if you received an absentee ballot, you should, she says you will need to vote by mail. If you vote at the poll, you will be considered a provisional voter.
That is correct. David Naiman of the Board of Elections is on the call. I would defer to him on those questions, but I do believe that's correct.
So maybe David can confirm that in the chat. And then Howard Schellenholt says, in light of Trump and GOP organizing security brigades to intimidate voters at polling places, what are the Democrats doing to counter that? Thank you for asking that question, Howard. We are in the process now, as we speak, recruiting, I'm going to call them poll watchers, but they, but they're not there to, to watch you. They're there to make sure that your rights are upheld at the polling places. And we are recruiting a whole cadre of people, precinct officials and others who will be at the polls, both during the in-person early voting and on Election Day, to both answer questions from voters, but also to ensure that the voters get to be fully enfranchised and cast their votes. And they're going to be on the lookout for, any kind of intimidation or any shenanigans like that. Not that we're going to engage with people, we are not, but we are going to be on the lookout for that. And we do have a full complement of voter protection a voter protection committee that, and including a voter hotline that will be advertised and available to voters as they go to the polls. They'll be readily available for them to use. So, I do want to say that we are mindful of that, and we are planning to make sure that in Montgomery County, at least, everybody who wants to vote is able to vote freely and fairly. Howard also asks, will the mail ballots be counted? The answer is absolutely they will be counted. And David Naiman says that they're going to start to be counted on October 6th. So they're going to be counted as they come in. So this whole scenario about, oh, it's going to take months to get the result, not in Maryland, because in Maryland, they're going to be counting the votes as they come in beginning October 6th. It doesn't mean that there won't be some delays, because we do anticipate that there's going to be a huge turnout in this election, which we want. But the ballots are going to be counted as they come in.
Excuse me, Linda, I believe the
Yes.
county executive has arrived.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Yeah, Michael answered about going to the vote center. So what you would do is go to the vote center and cash a provisional ballot. But let me just say that unless you spoil your, my opinion is, and David Naiman can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but my opinion is that if you get a mailed ballot, if you requested a mailed ballot and you have it, fill it out. And if you want to go to the vote center, put it in the drop box, okay? Because all of the voting centers are going to have drop boxes that are open the same hours and longer, actually, during early voting, the same hours as the polling places. So there's no reason to go inside the polling place and vote. You can take your ballot, fill it out, and drop it in the drop box. Then there's not this issue of whether you have a provisional ballot or not. Your ballot will just be a regular ballot that will be counted. Lisa Fuller is asking, I was asked today if you take your mail in, if you would take your mail into early voting and don't want to use the drop box. Well, then you would, as we're saying in the chat, you would then be casting a provisional ballot, I believe. I believe that's true. I think what you're saying is if you show them that you haven't cast it, I think you still cast a provisional ballot. But here again, I don't know why you would do that. Fill out your ballot, bring it to the drop box, put it in. You can say hi to everybody at the polls. You can still have the social whatever that you want to get from voting in person. Okay, I thought I saw another question in here. I guess not. Oh, Rachel Hopp, Michael answered your question. You can go to a vote center and cast a provisional ballot. Okay. Are there any other questions? All right, so as Michael said, the county executive has joined us. Welcome, County Executive Mark Elrich. Thank you for joining us. And if you would please, we've had quite a pretty robust discussion here tonight about all the ballot questions, and maybe you can just sum things up for us and tell us why it's so important for us to vote in this election. Not that we need to be told that, but.
If last night didn't convince you why it was important. That was the worst display I have ever seen in my life. Frightening. So let's talk about ballot questions. There are two big issues here. One's the composition of the council. The other is the budget question. And I want to do the composition of the council first, because frankly, I think it's easier. I think a system that balances at-large members with district members is a preferable system to a system that's either all at-large or all district. And the question D on the ballot proposes making this all districts, all 9 districts, and question C on the ballot proposes going to 7 districts and maintaining 4 at large. My preference was a little different mix, but The main thing is that this is something compromise that myself and the council agreed on. It gets 7 districts. The districts will drop in average size to about 150,000 from 210,000. I think it's a big deal in terms of making elected officials more accessible to a population, and frankly, having fewer people to tug on a person for their attention when there's only so much bandwidth that you can do as a council member. So I think there's an advantage in having more districts. I think, though, that it maintains the at-large members, and I'm fine with that. And it was unanimous position of the council, and I supported it as well. So that dispenses with what I think is the relatively easy question. The relatively challenging question is A and B. I got to say, first of all, I don't know how many of you understand how broken our current tax system is. And I'm here to tell you that it's a disaster. When Rich and I were trying to figure out why we weren't seeing growth in revenues, despite increases in assessments between and what really triggered it for us was homeowners saying, "What do you mean you don't have any money? I'm getting a 10% tax increase." And we found out all that was true. The way the charter was structured in 1990, the council, afraid of another Ficker amendment, decided they would fix the problem themselves, and they put in this charter amendment. And the charter amendment limited the amount of revenue you could raise to last year's revenue plus inflation. And then you could get money above that limit in the first year for new construction or changes in zoning that increased values in property. So this new stuff was meant to be added on top of it, and that would go make the second year's base or the following year's base. 2 things went seriously wrong. The county has a 3-year phase-in system. We did not capture the full value of new construction. And we got a clue to this when one of our former aides on the council said, "You do realize when Marriott comes online, that money's not going to add to your tax base." And we didn't realize that. So what happens is, because your revenues are limited, if something grows in value, say you invest in Bethesda and everybody else's property gets more valuable, or you invest in Silver Spring and all the commercial property becomes more valuable, the additional value would result in those people paying more taxes. But the number of dollars you can raise has nothing to do with the assessments. It's simply last year's revenues times inflation. So if Bethesda contributed another $500 million to tax revenue, if Silver Spring contributed $100 million to tax revenue, all that would do is displace existing revenues. That's frightening. So it doesn't grow. In the case of the county, where we've got a 3-year phase-in of assessments, it appears that construction only ever got captured if it was shown as new construction, and then the increase in value was captured in the first year. Increases in value after the first year weren't captured. So Marriott won't be fully valued until it's open and operating. It'll be taxed before that happens. And so we will miss out on the full value of Marriott going into the tax base here. If I give Marriott a tax cut, like for a job credit, and I give it as a property tax cut, which is what we do, Marriott's property taxes will be reduced. Their assessments will still be there, but the taxes will be reduced. When they become fully taxed, their money will now count against the cap instead of adding on as new construction revenue. So it affects our tax. We want to do a tax credit, it hurts us. If I give a break on affordable housing, it hurts us. And just the whole general operation of the bill hurts us. Now, the only way out of our mess was it took 9 votes on the council to raise the amount of revenue you could raise. And that didn't even necessarily mean raising the tax rate. The county right now is 3 cents below the rate we had when we raised it and got everybody angry that resulted in term limits. We've had to reduce our tax rate every year to keep the revenues from exceeding what we're allowed to raise. That is flat out crippling. A 9-vote majority could allow us to increase the revenues, but it would take 9 votes to allow us to go above the charter limit on revenues. Ficker's amendment, which is B, takes everything that is wrong with the system today and then says you can't even raise the revenues if you have 9 votes. It says that you cannot raise blanket prohibition on raising the tax rate that would generate additional revenues. You're stuck with the revenues times inflation. Whatever rate gets you last year's revenues plus inflation, that's what you get with the Ficker amendment. I can tell you the county is dead in the water if we do that. You can forget economic development. Frankly, you can forget the future of the county. There is no way we will raise enough money to build schools, and there's no way we'll raise enough money to do transportation. It just won't happen. Just like the last few years, we are unable to meet the school system's needs. It's not helped by the council giving away money in tax breaks to developers. That's 10 million every year out of what we do, and it could get worse this year. But we've not been able to meet these basic needs. And we've got to be, if you care about the future of the county, if you think we should be something other than a sleepy bedroom community, then we need a change. Now, what the change the council's proposed lets the county council raise the tax rate with 9 votes. Not with 8, with 9. So you need a unanimous council to raise the rate. But what it means is if our rate had been in place a couple of years ago at $1.02, it would still be $1.02, no less than $1.02 today. And the increases in value in property, plus all these other bad things that we did, all those other things get taken out of the bill as well. So if property is phased in for new construction over 3 years, it doesn't matter. As the property value goes up, you get the revenues off the new property value. If you rezone a piece of property, you do a master plan, and the land values increase, you get the increase in the land values. So we've rezoned massive parts of the county. Even though the law originally said we could take those tax revenues from the changes in zoning, they interpreted it for 30 years as we couldn't do that. Just like they interpreted that I couldn't capture 3 years of a phase-in of new construction. It's hard to believe. It's true. Rich and I looked at this. We called our financial people down. We said, you've got to be kidding us. How did you reach this conclusion? There was no explanation. The language in the law was very clear. As I said, there were no adjectives, adverbs, or modifiers of any form that preceded the part that said new construction and rezonings are exempt from the cap. But we put them under the cap. We, over the last 30 years, have probably lost $200 million in revenue. We would be in a way different place today if our base was different, if our base had been allowed to grow like other jurisdictions. So Virginia gets fully assessed every year. Every property gets assessed every year. And if the property values go up, they raise more money. And if they raise too much money, more than they need, they lower the rate. But they don't have to worry about lowering the rate from one year to next because they're free to adjust the rate in relationship to the property tax values. We have no freedom to do that whatsoever. So even though this keeps the 9-vote requirement, which I think is anti-democratic, and letting one person on a council block something you need to do, say like funding schools or funding bonds for transportation, no one person should be given that power. But it's better than what we've got right now, where if we don't pass A, then we're either going to get B or we're stuck with the current system. And that's why people have to not only vote to pass A, you have to vote to kill B. Because if both of them pass, we stay where we are. If we stay where we are, I guarantee you, we will not be building things in this county. Not libraries, not rec centers, not roads, not transportation, not schools. We will slowly watch that money go away. And that's a hard pill to swallow. So I'm not given to hyperbole on this kind of stuff, but this is truly something where, you all in this county hold the fate of this county really in your hands. You can set us on a path that lets us compete with Northern Virginia and other counties in Maryland and regionally, or you can leave us either almost completely crippled or completely crippled by either leaving what's in place or by passing the Ficker Amendment. This is why this is so critical. We need energy behind this. We need people to understand we're not looking to raise people's taxes. We're just looking to let the natural increase, particularly on commercial property, let that take place and let us realize the advantage of it. Just briefly, I'll say, just so you don't think that, Montgomery County is this high tax area. Why do you want more taxes? Montgomery County is the cheapest state in the Washington metropolitan region. If you were in the district, commercial property taxes are $1.85. Our taxes, by the way, are 98 cents. So commercial property taxes in DC for new construction go up to $1.85. Residential property taxes are down to 85 cents, partly because commercial property is funding a lot of infrastructure that supports commercial property that in our county is paid for by taxpayers, regular resident taxpayers. In Fairfax County, their base tax rate is $1.15. On top of that, they have 12.5 cents for transportation tax, only on commercial property. So commercial property pays $1.27 in Fairfax County to start with. They pay about the same in Arlington County. Both of them use this, the tax on commercial property. And then all of them use special taxing districts. So if you're in Tyson's Corner, your total tax load is $1.65. And I point this out because if we think Virginia is our competition and we think Virginia is eating our lunch, they're not eating our lunch because they're the cheap place to do business. They're eating our lunch because they're the place that made a decision right after the recession started that when they got out of this, they were going to raise the revenues to build the infrastructure that would attract business to Tyson's Corner. They rezoned Tyson's Corner, they put massive taxes on Tyson's Corner, and they were getting massive development in Tyson's Corner because the business community wanted the transportation breaks the traffic bottleneck, it brings people to Tyson's Corner, and it makes their properties worth a whole hell of a lot more money. In Potomac Yards, they've got a 20-cent tax on top of their base rate and their 12-cent rate for transportation. They got another 20-cent special district tax at Potomac Yards so they can build the infrastructure there that'll attract development. I can't do any of those things here, none of them. I can't do a general commercial property tax for transportation. I can't do that. We don't use special taxing districts this way in the county because we can't separate in property taxes on commercial and residential property. So we're stuck with one rate for both. So Virginia's going down one path. The business community actually supported the tax increases in Virginia because they recognized that paying taxes for 30 years to pay off a 30-year bond that brings in major transportation projects like the Silver Line is the kind of investment you make if you're thinking about where you want to be in the future. If you think your future depended on transit and that the future would be a lot better once that was in place, they made that decision. We need the freedom to start doing that here. And if we don't get that freedom, we won't do it. And we will have our lunch eaten by Virginia every day, every day. So that's my pitch. It's your county. Where do you want us to go?
All right. Like we said at the beginning, very important questions and not just the presidential race, right?
Yeah.
Are there any questions for the county executive? There's a Howard Schoenholtz has put some comments in the chat. But are there any questions? I know we had a lot of questions when this first came up, but this is our last chance before you go home, before you open that ballot and fill it out and then drop it in the Dropbox to ask questions of the county executive on these issues. Okay. All right, so thank you, County Executive Elrich, for coming tonight. That was a great way to end this. I think it was sobering, but I think it was good for people to hear. And as was pointed out in the chat, you know, it gives us a good perspective on when we talk to our neighbors about why this is so important. So really appreciate that very thorough and good explanation about those financial questions. So I want to thank you, and I also want to thank all of the elected officials who were on this call this evening. I also want to thank the Democratic clubs and caucuses of the various districts that sponsored this. I thought this was a great discussion. I want to thank our Ballot Question Advisory Committee. I want to give a special thanks to Michael Tardif, our communications chair, for all of his work, and to David Naiman on the Board of Elections for his work on this important election. And I also just want to say that, you know, we got to get out there now and do it. We're essentially 30 days away from taking back our country. We're 30 days away from changing our county and our state for the better. So get those ballots in, fill them out, get them in, take them to the drop boxes. And thank you, everybody, for coming tonight and for your terrific questions and insightful comments. And let's go do this. Let's elect a new president and let's strengthen our county and our state. Thank you very much for coming, and let's go, guys. Okay? Good night,
Thanks,
everybody.
Linda. You are the best.
Good night,
Good night.
everybody.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.